private boats, Richard Branson, all sorts of things am I hearing for your 40th birthday celebration. Hodgie, happy birthday.
Thank you, Kane. You know, it's like you don't believe everything that you hear. So
Private island, yes or no?
Can't confirm.
Private boat to get there, yes or no?
A friend's property, a hired transport. And Richard didn't turn up. He didn't reply to my RSVP. So.
A loose connection to, more than a loose connection to Richard Branson. I think I'm onto something here, Sammy.
No. There are little rumours that if you look into it, don't marry up to anything. But anyway, I've got some for you, Gerard. Let's move on and talk about football.
What do you got?
Robotomised, Serong, surely. As soon as I heard, I sat back and thought, I looked through, Caleb Serong averages 31. The least he's had this year is 25. Can he be robotomised? Can
anybody, as we've found out,
and shut him down?
Everyone can get shut down. Everyone can be robotomised. There's no question about that. And this bloke, what he does, I mean, he's a clearance king. 2 weeks ago, he had about 6-7 clearances, might have even been more. So he's a two-way run with, if you like. But, he's an important player for them. Third and the best and fairest. 2 years in a row, his credentials are enormous and growing by the minute.
And that's the thing is he's been sitting behind so many. You look at Parker the last few years, and then you got the start that they've had with some injured guys, and he's been playing his role. But we've sort of looked deeper as you've done, and he's been so consistent for him the last 2 years. It's great that he's starting to get a little bit of notice outside the Sydney Swans rooms.
Well, I looked at Patrick Cripps on the weekend, and he just tore them apart, the Cats. And you've just got to go with Patrick Cripps. He looks in great health. He looks as athletic as he's ever looked, running away from centre clearances. And when he was up against Sydney, Rowbottom went to him and, they got the operation that they wanted.
But I think that's a good spot to start, considering we've got Kane here, is why don't people run with Cripps? Why don't Lachie Neale on the weekend? I can understand Hugh McCluggage is a smooth mover, and Port Adelaide put Drew to McCluggage. Lachie Neale was outstanding. Cripps, we've all seen for years, both of these guys are Brownlow medalists, and you let them run around and do what they want. Both of them can turn a game in a quarter. We saw that for Cripps against Port Adelaide in the last quarter about 3 weeks ago. Lachie Neale, he's been up there in the top 2 or 3 players the last month, and guess what? Or last 6 weeks, and guess what? Brisbane Lions have turned their form around. Yeah. So you sort of put a little bit of a correlation and go, these two blokes are in great form. And both their sides are 2 of the best 3 sides going around at the moment. You sort of look at teams that are tagging. The Lions, we said 6 weeks ago, they're probably going to miss the finals. How have they changed things around? Yes, their skipper's gone well, but guess what? They started hunting the opposition. It started with Jared Berry. And on the weekend, Berry went to Butters. And yes, Butters still gets the ball, but it's the mindset between them. Dunkley has a look at Horn Francis in and around the stoppage to try and stop his bang for buck. We've spoken about Sydney with Jordan and what he's been able to do over the last 6 weeks. He took Whitfield on the weekend. And look at Carlton, Chin Cotter. He's been able to show me. So the teams that we're looking at going, geez, how are they so good? Who's going to beat them? Is it all because, yes, they've got talented blokes around them, but it's the mindset. It starts with hunting the opposition, and these 3 sides are doing that.
100%. 100% it starts with the mindset, and add Phillips to Oliver on the weekend and what North Melbourne got from that. And that's a player who was struggling for form. If you've got 44 players on your list, and you don't have 1 or 2 that can play that role, you're negligent as a footy club. And I don't think there are every club that can go, okay, we need to shut down Paddy Cripps this week. This is the player that is going to do that. There'd be 6 or 7 clubs that wouldn't know which magnet to put to Paddy Cripps. Now, if you're only going to use 33, 34 players for the year, you've got 10 spots on your list you're not even going to use. Dedicate one of those, train them up in the pre-season and have them ready to go. Won't be every week for moments like this when you need them. So, Hodgie, you're singing my song. It's been a frustration of mine for a long, long time. Speaking of tags, what are we doing with Tom Stewart? What are you advising him, and how do they get him out of this funk, and what does the rest of his career look like? Because he's got a clear weakness there.
Yeah, well, this is the hard thing. It wasn't as if he got tagged out of the game and had no impact. Like, he still took some intercept marks, he still led, and he still had 15 to 20 touches, and he's done that most weeks he's been shut out, but it hasn't been that intercept play. And I can understand where Chris Scott's coming from. He's backing his 5-time All-Australian defender to fight through this, because he's probably sitting there going, no, I want to handle this, I want to try and fight this myself. But at times you do need help. And I did like at the start of the last quarter that Scotty threw him to half forward, but as soon as you go to half forward and you've got to play a structured half forward role, it goes out the window. I would have thrown him to half forward and said, mate, you've got the license. You've got a chaos license. We used to give it to Sirioli. Mate, you're chaos. If you want to go and play up at the stoppage and you want to go and block for someone or fly through the stoppage, you go and do that because you've got a license to do whatever you want. To free Tommy Stewart from a hard tag from Chincotta, put him at half forward, but don't put him into a structured role. Go and run. Go and have fun. Go and put a block on. Go and let Danger do his thing and make it 2v1. Go and swap with the winger, so then the winger's in the stoppage. There's so many things that you can do when you drop away from that structured line. So I do like the fact that Scotty's backed him, but there's other roles further up the ground where he can go and have an impact. And you sort of look at Geelong and where have they dropped away the last 4 years? The midfield. So they've got that big midfield, the Duncans, the Guthries, Selwood's gone. Danger's just come back from his injury. They need another mature big body in there, and that's what Tommy Stewart, we know he can hit hard. So I don't think there's a few more things that they can try and give him a little bit of freedom.
What it means, though, is that the defence without Tom Stewart needs to somehow get their confidence back, because without Stewart there, it seems like their whole system, the grid system, whatever, the zone system, whatever you want to call it, it's just fallen apart. And, some of their players are having their worst season, probably being masked because Tom Stewart's getting all the heat.
Yeah, and Sam De Koning's gone in the ruck. So there's another pillar of your defence that's gone out of it. Not sure if that's a long-term play, Hodgie, of De Koning being a ruck, or whether he goes back to defence. I'm not sure.
I think how his brother sort of handled him, and I didn't mind the tactic. Look, go in there and have a bit of a crack, try and unsettle him. When Tom looked at him and sort of laughed and said, "Hey, little bro, I've got you covered," and he grabbed it out of the ruck, kicked the goal in the first 5 minutes, I actually thought Sam fought on.
He did.
But Tom knew. Tom knew. The older brother looked at him going, "Mate, I've got you covered." But you sort of look at the back end. They've got College Asney down there. If you throw Sam back into defence, you're getting – Geelong had 43 inside 50s on the weekend, so it doesn't really matter compared to a 58. It doesn't really matter if Tom's there or not. The ball's still going inside their forward 50, and it doesn't really – all I'm saying is that for them to help Tommy Stewart, they need to put him further up the ground, and the defence will work around without him being there.
Geez, I was pleased, though, for the De Koning's mum.
Jackie.
When Sam kicked that goal, she was thinking the Christmas table. At least he's got a goal, and
he actually was pretty good.
he was good after the initial onslaught.
So he describes it as an investment in their future, Chris Scott.
Yeah.
And he probably needed a spark, let's be fair, because the competitiveness has been lacking. So I wonder if they do go on with it now, and what that says for Reece Stanley and the other, Toby Conway and the other rucks on the list, albeit Toby can't quite get his body right.
Yeah, and whether they, speaking of Rowan Marshall, whether they do go after someone like that or a backup ruckman like a Pitnet from
they've
Carlton,
never been a club to pay big money for a ruckman.
Yeah, but are they watching what Grundy's doing? Are they seeing what Gawn, De Koning, Jackson is doing? The mobile ones that are high possession ruckmen, I think, are the ones worth investing in, and Marshall could be that player.
Can
Have
we
they
go
made a
back
mistake? Sorry.
So can we go back to the Koning's parents, their mum?
Yeah.
I've never seen someone be more excited when their sons are fighting on the ground. We had a camera on for a majority of the night. As soon as Tom and Stam started fighting, the players around there were laughing. We crossed it to their mum at one stage, and she's cheering it on.
Yep.
She wanted to see which brother was the strongest. And well done to the umpires as well, because umpires could have thrown a few free kicks. It was actually entertaining. I know the game got blown away, and at least there was something, a little bit of a sideshow that we could sort of sit back and go, two brothers like they were in the backyard having a little bit of a biffo.
Hodgie, if you did an act like Stephen May did on Saturday night and faked for a free kick and have been fined since, would you have put yourself up for a media appearance and just express that you were disappointed in yourself? It's a poor example to set and you won't do it again.
Yeah, normally clubs like that have a rotation, but if you did something like that, and look, I'll put my hand up, everyone's fake for free kicks. Everyone has done that, so we can't sit back and go, we've never done that. So I've ducked my head trying to. I just wasn't flexible enough to get low enough to get the free kick. But what he did there, he realised all players are trying to do it. He did it to the nth degree. I'm glad the AFL fined him, but I think the AFL have to go to that next stage. As soon as a player, whether they've been hit in the head or as soon as they grab as if they've been hit for it, you've got to go off the ground. That's going to deter any player like a May trying to get that free kick, because most times that would have started a scuffle, a report, a suspension, and then we look back and go, his head didn't even hit the ground, but he's thrown it back and then held it. So I like the fact they did a fine. And I reckon, I don't think May's ever going to do that again with the heat that he's had come on him. But I wouldn't mind the AFL being a little bit firmer with the medico saying, nah, get him off. He needs to go and spend the 15 minutes because he tried to fake it.
I would have loved, exactly agree with everything you said. Melbourne have put him up today and he could have just said, look, that was unacceptable.
He's going to go up at some stage.
It was a poor effort by me. I'm surprised he hasn't done it already.
No, it's not going to go. It's not going to go anywhere. He's going to be
Today's the day, though.
Yeah.
Today's the day you do it.
But if you do it today, you nip it in the butt. Yeah. If he goes and speaks today at 9 o'clock, we speak about it till 12, Correct. And it's like, oh, he's put his hand up. It's like anything. If you admit your fault and say, hey, I made a mistake, I was stupid, that people normally say, well, everyone makes mistakes, everyone can move on. No one's perfect. But if you let it dwell for a little bit of time, you sort of sit back and go, well, hang on, maybe he's sitting there thinking he didn't do anything wrong.
He accepted the sanction, though. I mean, he could have challenged it via written submission.
On what grounds?
No, but you're saying he could have put his hand up and said he was wrong. I mean, he has, because he's accepted the sanction. He would just want this to be over. I mean, if I was
the way
him,
to be over, if he did what Kane said, just go bang.
As quick as humanly possible.
Sammy, I can tell you there's a lot of players that accept the tribunal 2 weeks when they sit there and think, I want to fight it. I don't agree. I want to fight it. So just because he's accepted it doesn't mean he 100% agrees with it.
Can I ask you, Hodgie, about the dangerous tackle, in particular the one with Paddy Dangerfield, because it didn't have a couple of the normal ingredients of the sling and the slam?
Oh, I'm torn between this one, and I've been a real big one for protecting the players with the dump tackle and the bumping, and because we've seen blokes that we've grown up with and we've seen blokes we've got drafted with have serious mental issues post because of it. I thought Danger did everything he possibly could to protect. Who did he tackle again?
Sam Walsh.
Sammy Walsh. I thought his body hit the ground first. He was sort of crouching him down, and I felt that it was the momentum of the ball and which let him go forward, hit the ground. And I can understand people out there, and I'd love to hear other people's opinion of it. And people are going to say he tackled him, he pinned an arm, and his head hit the ground, so he should be suspended. And I totally understand that. Totally understand it. But I'm sitting here as a player going, what more could he have done? It felt like he tried to guide him down, and as I said, I'll probably be wrong, and he might get suspended. But I can understand, and I'm glad they're fighting this because I felt for Danger when they gave him that week.
Well, I can tell you what they'll expect. They'll say in the tribunal tomorrow night they expect him, and people will scoff at this, but they'll expect him to release an arm.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not completely offended by that. Like I'm with you, Hodgie, on the fact that usually I'd be on the player's side, but my initial reaction was, that's a nasty one, and he's.
Oh, well, they have to take it up, though, Geelong. I mean, where their season's
question
at,
with that. I just wonder what they're going to argue to get him off.
Yeah, well, all the things Hodgie said there, I'm sure the biomechanism might get pulled out. He tried to hold him up.
He jackknifed when his knees hit the deck.
But the trigger is, head hits the deck, both arms pinned. It was always going to get cited. I mean, Michael Christian, in many ways, it might follow the proper process. Michael Christian has to send him up.
I'm not worried about sending him up. I think he's made the right decision. But I just like the AFL to clarify what they expect Hodge to do. Now, Hodgie, what they expect Dangerfield
release
to
an
do.
arm.
Well,
It will
if
be
it's
release
release the arm, well then say you're not supposed to tackle with two arms.
What's your thoughts on
very hard?
What's your thoughts on the fallout from the disaster at Adelaide Oval on Saturday and Ken Hinkley in particular, Hodgie?
Well, what we have seen from Port Adelaide, especially the home grounds and Kenny, when they've won those close games, the passion out on the field. From about halfway through the second quarter, that passion, that drive, that energy that Rosie, Butters, Horn-Francis bring, it was zapped. Like it wasn't there. And then you're watching Kenny during the third quarter and during the last quarter, and you felt that they had nothing left. It felt like they'd given everything. And I sort of looked back and thought, how can they get to that? For the team that we watched, I was there and I watched them play against Essendon at the start of the year, and they were unbelievable. They ran Essendon off their feet. Kane, you know them better than what I do, but I'm sort of looking through is it their tools from the ruck to their forwards that, because they've had no consistency, is that letting them down? Because their game style is let's go as fast as we possibly can. We get it from half back and we get it into our forward 50, forward half. And for a year and a half, they've been the best team at scoring from either stoppage or turnover in their forward half because their bigs have been able to create a contest, bring it to ground, grab a stoppage, and then they're set up ready to go behind the ball because they've had that lack of consistency up forward. Is that the reason that the ball is not staying in their forward line? Teams are turning it over and they're transitioning it the other way and making them look like they don't want to defend. But I believe that Port Adelaide team is too good for it to be such a big change in 6 months or in 18 months, let alone the 6 months that we saw at the start of the season.
And I think that's the issue. And that's where Ken becomes endangered is because of that lack of effort, that lack of energy, a completely different performance that we saw at the start of the year, a performance that is uncharacteristic of this team under Ken Hinkley for a long period of time, and then you start to worry about that energy level. Are they still there? Are they engaged? Is Ken Hinkley, does he have the energy? Because I agree with you, I saw him during the third quarter just sitting on the interchange bench with his arms crossed, really, out of answers. Now, if you're coaching from the interchange bench, that you're there to energise the players, to be up and about, to be instructing. Otherwise, get up in the coach's box where you can see the game better. So, I mean, there's a few alarm bells for me.
Are you concerned
Hodgie?
about how dumb it looked, a few blokes leaving their men to go to impact on a contest they don't get to?
The timing of that was
timing
bizarre,
was
wasn't it?
horrific.
Yeah, and I guess to the point, the timing can look bad, and you can be out when there's no pressure up the field, which I think is what Hodgie's talking about. Some of Finlayson's efforts are just...
Zerk Thatcher.
He just shouldn't be playing football at that level if you can't provide a basic chase. I think Dixon's been an important player for them, just with the sort of the spiritual player, and Power Pepper's the other one. They've often been sort of the energy in that forward line, so to not have them there and Dixon not physically be able to compete like he did. But, yeah, I mean, we wait for the response. I was sort of waiting for it against Brisbane. It wasn't there, and time's running out, unfortunately.
Would have made for a sour gathering of the 04 Premiership team.
I don't think it slowed them down too much.
Once they get a beer in hands.
It might have sped it up.
Kane, are they? I'm looking through. Whenever you watch a team like that, you go through your own experiences. And 2010, we had to change our game style because we got to about, I think it was about round 8 or 9, and we were 1-7 or 2-8 or something like that. And we realised that if we keep playing this way, we're not playing finals. And that was the time that Kennett thought about dropping Clarko back to the seconds until so the coach would get back in form. That was how poor we were going. So we changed our game style. Changed our game style and then end up fighting back. And we got back into the top 8 by the end of the year. Went out straight away. But are they? And we had some senior blokes who could change it and adapt to the game style. Is their list smart enough, educated enough, understand footy enough to change their style up? Maybe don't go so fast from a halfback. Maybe
aggressive, yeah.
Compose it a little bit, building it up, just so you can defend behind the ball.
So they've got to turn the on-ball stuff around. So if you can't win, their game relies with that midfield, as it should, on winning stoppage and getting field position. So, and maybe they just get back to the real contest stuff, putting it on the midfield, saying we need you to win contest. Give us an ugly ball inside 50. Doesn't have to be
the ruckman
perfect.
can't get dominant.
I mean, I remember that there was a game against West Coast with the interceptors they had behind the ball. They just go ugly inside forward 50, and then maybe play a more one-on-one defensive system behind the ball. But that all relies on your midfield winning contest and clearance, giving you the field position so that your defence can set up and they're not trying to defend fast play and press when they shouldn't be pressing. So, yeah, I think they'd be looking at that. But it is an admission of that you got something wrong, isn't it, through your pre-season planning when you've got to change your game plan at round 16. It's not ideal.
Because I've never seen Port Adelaide for that. It was 42 clearances to 27.
Smashed.
There was no yelp. There was, and in saying that, it was a free-flowing game of football, which Brisbane don't normally play like that. I expect there to be more stoppages, considering both teams are fairly good at it. But for them to get beaten that convincingly, considering that's been their strength, especially from centre bounce as well.
Just going back to Lachie Neale, I think the reason they didn't tag Lachie Neale was because they were trying to shelter their own man in Butters. So Butters went to Lachie Neale trying to play off him. So they're going to have to work out essentially what they're going to do in that situation, particularly if you're losing.
And can Wines and Drew play in the same midfield? I personally don't think they can. That's not the great mix. Ollie Wines and Willem Drew are the same player. So to try and invent a spot for Wines, there's a hard call need to be made there. I know he turned his footy around a few weeks ago and was reasonable, but just not functioning that system there. So they'll look at that, maybe a bit smaller in their forward line as well, but this weekend against the Saints is pretty big.
Hodgie, the news from Sammy was that Norton is back and Darcy is back. I mean, the Bulldogs, you listen to Kingy and Hoyne, the Bulldogs profile absolutely flying at the present time, but they've got to make some tough calls on what they're doing with their structure because 4 tools doesn't work and they've got Lob in reasonably good form. How do they make those decisions?
When you're bringing back someone like Norton, who's been the key person for your forward line,
Yep.
I know Lob's been in some okay form considering where he was 4 weeks ago. Lob would be the first one out for me. You've got the future in Darcy. You've got the future in Ugle-Hagan, and you got Norton, has been the forward for them for the last 4 or 5 years. So
do you bring them both in, and therefore you're changing your basically your tall small structure?
Yeah, but they've played like that a lot. It's not as if Norton's been out. How long's Norton been? 5 weeks.
This will be if he return. He's got to get through main training, but they're confident he will. I think it's a month today. So yeah, it was 4 to 6 weeks as a window. This is the best possible outcome for a medium medial ligament strain as it was, Hodgie.
Yeah, so that would be my pick. If I had Western Bulldogs list sitting there, I'd be going Ugle-Hagan, Darcy, and Norton. Even though Lobb, Lobb's what is he, 27, 28, been to a couple of clubs. He's always going to be that fringe player. And I think consistently, from what I've seen effort-wise, you'd get more out of those other three than what you have over Lobb over the time at the Western Bulldogs.
And rotate one through the bench, I take it.
Well, Darcy, as soon as Darcy will probably go into the ruck, and it works that way. So you'd always have 2 talls, and the third would be there when all 4 with the ruck.
Sammy, what's the latest with the Sports Integrity Australia findings?
Oh, geez, how long have you got? Look, this is long-winded, but basically the review that was in train, of course, the findings of that came back today. Now, they said that the AFL's illicit drugs policy needed to be better communicated and explained to players and officials at all levels of the game. But the government agency cleared the league of any breaches of the World Anti-Doping Code following that investigation. Claims of secret testing, of course. Claims of feigned injuries to cover up positive drug tests during the week. You'll remember that was Andrew Wilkie using parliamentary privilege with that statement signed by the former Melbourne Dr. Zeeshan Arain that, there was off-the-books drug testing and that was subverting the anti-doping process. So the statement released by SEA this morning said there were no breaches of the WADA code through the anti-doping rule violation, and AFL players or support personnel, or that injuries were feigned to cover up for positive drug testing during the week by the AFL or club doctors. But Andrew Wilkie stood by it today, though. He said, in fact, the league had dodged the WADA breach on a technicality, he said, and the technicality being that was because the secret test took place during the week and not on match day. But that's the whole policy. The whole illicit drugs policy is during the week.
The bloke who didn't understand the policy is Andrew Wilkie.
Was the whistleblower. In so many ways, he was. So, look, better communication. There's a lot of confusion out there from people. That was identified by SEA. They acknowledged that. They also did go on to say quickly, Kane, the confidential nature of the models. This is doctor and player. Prevented the AFL from sharing information publicly, and SEA said that did create a degree of suspicion. But it's hard to know where the AFL go with this. They're reviewing it at the moment.
They've been reviewing it long before this, though.
Yeah, they have been, and they were going to do it anyway. But in that ongoing wrestle between being punitive and being a welfare model, which Andrew Dillon said today they're unashamedly a welfare model, how is there ever going to be more transparency? Because the players won't go for that in what is essentially a volunteer policy that not many other sports do. So certainly no Olympic sports do, as we're on the doorstep of the Paris Games.
All right, and a couple of players back for the Pies this week.
Yeah, Pendlebury back, Myercheck back. They've got the Gold Coast up there. They want to play the Gold Coast. Well, they want to play 2 games on the Gold Coast going forward. They've got 1 up there this week. Some breaking news from AFL House, and that is that Logan Morris is the round 15 Rising Star nominee. You'd like the cut of his jib, Hodgie?
Did you ring Shifter up, Hodgie? I mean, seriously, he could have been Rising Star for the last 4 weeks. Shifter's had a blind spot.
Yeah, I think you just got to be even. Living up in Queensland, you don't really get as much notice down in Victoria, Gerard. But he's done nothing wrong, and I think this is it's a really good thing for coaches out there. And I know Fages has been so consistent with the guys that have been loyal to him over the last 5 years that I guess Logan was there just waiting for an opportunity, and it's taken a knee for Darcy, taken a knee for Link McCarthy to give him his opportunity. And tell you what, he's taken it with both hands. So hopefully a few coaches around, if you see some guys with a little bit of potential, then don't wait for an injury. Throw them in there and see what they can do, because they might surprise you.
What was he, pick 31, I think, in last year's draft? And it's a hell of a pick. The boy from Werribee, because he is that sort of real hybrid. He's good at ground level. He's got great skills. I can remember a goal he kicked where he just centred the ball. I think it was at Marvel Stadium. Hit one of his co-forwards on the chest with the magnificent kick, and he can take a good grab, and he can play on pies.
It's actually right. It was actually McDonald's.
Exactly, McDonald's.
He played the VFL side, came back, and that was the big thing is he was able to come on, kick a couple of goals in his first game after playing 3/4 of a game of VFL, having a good old feed at Macca's on the way up, wearing Will Ashcroft's boots
And
before his
Sloop.
first game, but he's kicked multiple goals in all but 2 of his games this year. So I think it shows that you're right. That they've found a gem. He's able to get into really good spots, and the 2 goals he kicked on the weekend. One was in the pocket about 30 metres out, kicking on his right, and the next one was a snap on his left. So look, he's promising.
Do you play Ashcroft? Give him a game through the
Yes.
2s? 100%.
No, I know.
He's playing AFL.
Is
Yeah,
he straight in?
Playing AFL.
Okay.
I sort of look at it, and 5 weeks ago, I would have been, you need to get him back in there. I'm sort of sitting here now going, does he need the fitness? But seeing how he first hit the scene, seeing how professional he was, this kid would have done everything he possibly could to do to make sure he's ready for AFL. So they do have the flexibility of playing him in a half or 3/4 just to make sure he's cherry ripe for fitness. But especially on a Friday night against Melbourne. But either way they go, I still can't wait to see him play because his first 15, 16 games last year before his knee were
he's
outstanding.
terrific. I'd still give him a run the 2s.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, Hodge, you
That's
talk
old
about
school.
Brisbane's resurgence. Like, I go to guys like Logan Morris. Like, when you think the injuries they had, so Wilmot, Fletcher, I love Bruce Reveal, Morris we've mentioned, Kyle Lohmann's energy, even Bailey and Rayner playing through the middle with Will Ashcroft to come back in. I reckon injuries, we've seen it at Collingwood, you expose the kids, and then when everyone gets back, the upside can be huge from that,
Yeah,
I reckon.
I mean, they're
So-
looking forward to next year, but they've got all of a sudden a sneaky chance again this year.
It's
But I must
balanced,
admit,
isn't it?
Hodge, I loved Dermot's assessment. About 3 weeks ago, I did the Friday night show on Fox with him, and he was talking about the hunting lions. The decision to go back to Berry as the tagger, I think, made a significant psychological shift, and they got a bit harder at it and competitive around the contest. And against the Dogs, it was just the Brisbane Lions of old.
Yeah, that's right. It was Berry going to Bontempelli because I was sitting down there and I was doing the game and I thought, you've got to go Dunkley. You've got to go Dunkley to Bonk because he's done that in the past. He's gone to Cripps in the past and been really successful on him. And you'd think body size, it doesn't upset the mix of the midfield too much considering Berry had been playing a few different roles, wing, a little bit of half forward. But I tell you what, it's a mindset change. They came in knowing that they had to hunt the opposition because they were. If they had lost any more than a couple on the way home, then their season was done. So it's amazing. They went through for a break, came back. It was a master stroke by whether it was Cam Bruce or Fagan or both as a collective, but it's changed the group and how they've been because since that game, they've been unbelievable.
Hawthorn legend Luke Hodge is with us on Sports Day on a busy Monday night. The Harcourt's open line, a reminder of that. It's 1300 736 736. And we do read your temper text, so keep them coming through 0433 98 11 16. Hodgie, just south from the studio you're sitting at resides the Gold Coast Suns Football Club. And as I run through their results this year, they won their 5 games at home. They won their pair of games at Darwin. That gets them to 7 wins. Their 7 losses have all come on the road, and that trend continued at the weekend. Nat dropped us a text, and Nat says, probably the 50th time we've said this about Gold Coast, but is this game on Saturday against Collingwood at home the biggest game of their club's history? If they lose, they'll probably be 2 games out of the 8. Pendles to Goey Mycheck most likely back, and the Pies are in good form. It is massive, this game.
Well, Sammy, I've said that their last 2 away games. I said when they came up against Carlton, I thought this is their chance. If they can beat them down in Melbourne, and then last week against Fremantle, I thought if they could beat them over there, they might prove it. But they can't play away from home. This is, and I'm looking at stats from this year. So you just said it then, playing at home, whether it's at Gold Coast or up at Darwin, there's 7 wins, playing away there's 7 losses. But it's how they've done it. Scoring, with their 7 home wins, the 7 home games, they're number 1 for scoring in the whole of AFL. When they play away, do you know where they're rated for scoring?
18th.
Number 18.
How can that be?
Don't worry. It doesn't stop there. Disposal differential for the opposition. Do you know where they're rated at home?
1.
Number 1. Not as bad on this one, but they're number 16th for when they play away. So you're getting the most football compared to the opposition compared to 16 for when you're playing away.
Hang on, they got goalposts, they got a boundary line. What? An hour in the plane, you just lose your ability?
Not finished there, Sammy.
Still going. There's
Inside
more.
50s, which gives you the best opportunity to kick a winning score by getting the ball inside. Jared, guess where they're rated?
I'd say at home they'd be about 1, and away they'll be in the bottom quartile.
You're correct. They're number 1. And for away, they're 17th.
17th, yeah.
So this is, as you said, the oval's the same. Yes, there might be conditions, some slippery conditions up at Gold Coast or in Darwin, but the fact is that scoring they're 1 and they dropped to 18. Disposal differential, they're 1. They dropped to 16th. Inside 50 different, they're first and dropped to 17th. This comes down to maturity. For me, it comes down for how professional the guys are and what's going on in between their head. As soon as they jump on a plane, and people talk about it, but that mantra you hear, I know Clarko used to have one back there. Sorry, my mic's going a little bit. Clarko used to have a mantra at Hawthorn, and I know Ross Lyon when he was at St Kilda and Freo, anywhere, anytime, any place. Yeah. It doesn't matter who you're playing, where you're playing, or what kind of game style you're going to bring in. You need to have that same mindset, that same focus, and that same hardened resolve to play no matter where it is. Because for an interstate team, guess what? To win a premiership, you're not doing it at home. You have to play at the MCG. So it's just damning to say that Gold Coast have come so far, but the biggest thing for them is as soon as you pack up those away shorts, you need to bring the same mentality, the same mindset as what you do when you're playing at home.
Joey Montagna homed in on their midfield, and we did the same on the coverage last night. But the stats for the big three in the middle, Took,
Rao
and there is and Anderson, they're about 40% off in all of those key statistics. And so, I mean, if your big three are getting flogged and they're dropping their standards, well, everything else is going to go to water as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's are we putting a lot of pressure on Rowell and we're putting a lot of pressure on Anderson? These are still guys. Rowell had a year out. Anderson's still developing. It's a pretty hard position to both of those two to lead a midfield. So all I'm saying is
doesn't worry him at home though, Hodgie.
Yeah, exactly right. That's what I'm saying. So the being comfortable, getting used to the same change rooms, getting used to the same pre-game routine, the same captain's run the day before on your home ground. The maturity you have to think about what do we do when we go away? What do we do that's different? Start to replicate the same morning routine. Get up at the same time. Go to bed at the same time. I know when we first started travelling at Hawthorn, I would go there and they'd have a buffet. So what do you do when you have a buffet? You don't have your same one bowl of pasta like you do at home and maybe you have a little bit of ice cream, or you go there and you have a little bit of pasta and you have a little bit of stir fry, and then you go across and have some bread that you don't normally have at home, and then
you have
the couple of Tim Tams. You have the little chocolate dessert with some ice cream.
Get on
and
the soft serve.
So all of a sudden, I know, but you sort of sit back and go, it doesn't mean that much.
Great memories, though, Hodgie. Great memories.
I wonder why I always played 2 kilos heavier away, but it wasn't until you sort of sat back. And I know Andrew Russell, who's doing wonderful things at Carlton, when we were travelling to state, they started putting portion sizes on our plates, and you couldn't go back for another one unless you went and got the tick of approval until we actually proved that we were the same team away. And I know it sounds funny, but when you go away, you're used to eating what's in front of you. You've got to try and fine tune it to be the exact same as when you're at home. And clearly for Gold Coast, they're unable to do the same away as what they're doing at home.
Well, there's a simple solution. Ban the buffet.
Oh, it's like Dr. Phil used to say, put the Twinkie down, Gerard. Ned Moore, just before we leave the Suns have just announced that this is big because their backup ruckman, Ned Moyle, who they really rate and has a bright future, they're pretty confident in that, has re-signed for 4 more years. So despite being under the co-captain there, Jared Witts, of course, he's looked long-term. So he had plenty of interest elsewhere, so that's a big one for them, Hodgie.
Yeah, it is. I think with O'Reilly at Adelaide, sorry. I've got my ruckman mixed up. I know they were chasing him. They were looking hard. But for a young ruckman who's got a lot of grit, he's a very aggressive ruckman. So I know there's and Kane was talking about earlier, any ruckman who can show that they're happy to tackle, chase, be physical, they're going to be sought after. So for them to sign him for 4 years is a super effort.
Yep, big effort.
Yeah. When you're recruiting a ruckman, what's your main issue? Is it the hit out? Or is it their work around the ground or their actual clearance stuff?
For me, they've got to have a contest. So they don't have to go and win every contest. That's not the crucial thing. It's making sure you're not dominated and letting the other ruckman spike it or letting the other ruckman hit it 360 degree. Yeah. But then follow up from that first contest, it is how do they chase, tackle and lay and be physical in and around. I used to hate rucking against Ben Hudson and Jamie Charman, these guys who you're running along the ground, and all of a sudden, because you're running next to their midfielder, they're going to try and hit you to put you off the game. Having a physical ruckman and someone who's going to compete is crucial to the midfielder around him.
Because Grundy's numbers, he's the fourth midfielder. Yeah. I mean, we all talk about hit-outs. Well, you know.
Tom De Koning's last month the same, yeah.
Yeah, and it is the key component, and I just think young ruckman coming into the game, 14, 15, 16, you got to chase the footy and train like a midfielder because that's what your expectations are.
Yeah. I mean, Hodgie and his mate Louis nearly drove them out of the game when they went third man up every 5 minutes. So thankfully that rule got wiped out. Hodgie, you killed that one off.
No, that was just a part of the game. And once again, it's just like the rush points, they had to change the rules.
You wanted to talk about the draft value index and I guess the bidding system for father-sons particularly. Now, the AFL is going to sit down with the clubs tomorrow and walk them through the latest with this, Hodgie, but you got some thoughts on the point system?
No, my one was you can't just go and change it. I know that Laura came out and said that, look, we've been given warnings to the clubs and that this is going to happen, but how far can you trade in advance?
2 years.
2 years. That nothing should be changed prior to 2 years in advance. Because if you can only trade up to, because teams went and planned for what they're going to do for the next 2 years. Look at Carlton, prime example. If you want to go and change it for 3 years' time, no problems, because no one can trade up to 3 years in picks. So they've made a rule to you can only trade 2 years in advance. You cannot bring anything more closer than that 2 years, in my opinion, because teams, you talk about teams being organised, teams being planned and trying to build for a future. Carlton have planned. Carlton have organised, and they did trades last year to make sure that they could bring in the Camporellis. You can't go and change it at the drop of a hat just because it suits you. You got to listen to the clubs, and you got to give them enough. If you've given 2 years advance of trades, you cannot change anything prior to that 2 years.
There's a lot of he said, she said with this because some clubs say they were
Don't care
told, the AFL say they were told.
I don't care what the AFL said. If you've given them the rules of saying you cannot trade more than 2 years in advance, they're planned for those 2 years. So leave it. Anything after 2 years, no problems. You go and change it because no one's put anything at risk prior to that. So leave it until the 2 years and then make whatever change that you want.
That's good. I just wanted to see you fired up a bit more.
I'll throw my pennants back down.
It's just a straight logic decision, though. I mean, when you say he said, she said, who's the he said?
Well, let's say the he's Carlton, the she's the AFL, and several rival clubs just say, no, the Blues are taking the mickey. They were told the changes would come.
It's the AFL that is not listening. Once again, is not listening to the clubs. That they're going to try and enforce what they need to do. For once, sit back, listen, and be fair for the rules that you've put in place.
I've spoken to a couple of clubs who aren't impacted.
Yeah.
They've got no notice. They don't believe there's been notice.
Yeah. Yeah, and some do, though. So, again, it depends who you ask. The Blues, just more generally, before we let you go, Hodgie, quickly. I know you've got a dash, but obviously impressed by their recent form.
We've spoken about their forwards, we've spoken about their mids, we've spoken about their backs. It's the ability to hunt what I've really liked. You go through and have a look at their forward 50s on against Geelong on Friday night. They had 22 inside forward 50 tackles to 8. So you can be as skillful as you want, but if you've got Owies laying 5, Kennedy and Chincotta 3, and Chincotta played on Stewart, who's down there a bit more than what he normally is, but then you got Cripps, Fogarty, Curnow, and Williams all having multiple tackles. Geelong had one person have more than one tackle in their forward 50. So I know everyone's sitting up here talking about, yes, they've built a great list, but what they have brought in is energy and pressure. Yep. And I've got one here for you, Sammy. Since 2018, do you know, we're talking about the pressure rating and the pressure factor, and everyone's unsure on what the pressure factor is. Just to break it down, if you get over 200, that's an elite game in the pressure factor. So since 2018, there's been 10 teams that have scored 125 points and got over 200 pressure acts, because normally if you have a high pressure game, it might be 60 to 80 and you don't score much. So there's been 10 times since 2018. Carlton have done it 3 times under Vossi. So what shows me is that they've got the ability to move the ball, they've got the ability to win contests, they've got the ability to kick a big winning score. But what underlines that is they've got the ability to chase pressure and put enough pressure on the opposition to turn the ball over. And for me, that's finals football.
That's where Owies, I think, has just kept on growing. He's kicking multiple goals, but he's a pressure machine.
Yeah, and
if you can mix the both, that will set you up for September. If they can continue to do that, look out for the Blues in September.
Fogarty's a silent assassin in that area as well. So 22 inside 50 tackles to 8 it was back on Friday night. And Melbourne, like, I don't know if Clayton Oliver and the drop-off there, which is stark last year to this one, Hodgie, is, you know, this is a star player perhaps paying for an interrupted pre-season that there's just no shortcuts for in the modern game. I mean, how are you to read the Ds and the form of their star man, Clayton Oliver?
Yeah, clearly he's pre-season, and he's injured. Don't forget, he had that hand injury early in the season, so that's limited a little bit. But I think it's not only Oliver, it's the blokes around him. Brayshaw out, Petrarca out, Oliver not to the same form. They have had a lot of change go through that midfield, but it's their whole game. Defensively, turnovers. I think if you look at all of their stats since about round 8 or 9, they're in the bottom half of all the main stats that you're looking at, whether it's scoring, points against, turnover, scores differential. they're just not living up to what they've done. And we've always blamed that it's been their centre forward that has let them down. For the last 6-7 weeks, it's been their whole game, with the ball, without the ball, and in contests, this is why they've dropped away and they've been beaten by West Coast, been humiliated by Fremantle, and almost lost on the weekend.
Yeah. I like Trent Rivers in there, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
did look
when you trade that depth, like you trade Arms and you trade Jordan and you lose Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver's out of form, then something's got to give, and it's good to see him in there and having a fair dinkum crack at it. Maybe it'll hold him in good stead going forward. Hodgie, magnificent as always. You've got to leave us a little bit earlier. We'll love you and leave you.
Thank you, guys. I'll see you next week.